Let's welcome in Brian Hoyer to the show. Brian played for Coach Belichick and just heard our conversation and wrapped that up. So, Brian, how you doing today? Happy holidays, and what do you think about the discussion we were just having?
Yeah, I'm great. Happy holidays. I feel like I just always walk into like a storm of debate. It is just like, I'm like, what did I walk into today? So, look, I was listening. Coaching matters significantly. Obviously, I grew up in Cleveland and was a fan of the Browns when Bill was the head coach, and people were not happy with him. And then I played for him in New England, and obviously I came along after 3 Super Bowl wins. And
my quarterback room was not a home for me because of Brian Hoyer.
I'm on my vacation last week in Florida, and I get a text from Mac Jones who goes, "Hey, funny, I didn't get this treatment as a rookie." And look, I'll be honest, Johnny's right. That was an opportunity for me to go out and be the starter of my hometown team. But I was kind of apathetic towards him, I would say. I didn't go out of my way to be a jerk to him, but in the same sense, I was trying to win this job and go out and perform the best I could. I feel sorry that he feels that way about it. I always looked at it like, never had any animosity towards Johnny. If anything, it was towards the owner and the GM who were always trying to push him ahead of me when clearly he wasn't ready and I was going to be the starter. So
I don't have a bad word to say about Brian Hoyer. So there was instances in the quarterback room early on where I would ask the same question a couple times and he'd be at the head of the table.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Again? We're doing this again? Wow.
Yo, what's good, everyone? You are not going to believe what just went down in Cleveland. Brian Hoyer, a 15-year NFL veteran who's seen it all, just went on Cleveland Browns Daily and absolutely torched Kevin Stefanski for lying about Shedeur Sanders. And when I say torched, I mean this man held nothing back. This isn't just some random player talking trash. This is Brian Hoyer, a guy who's been in quarterback rooms with Tom Brady, who understands NFL politics better than anyone, calling out a head coach on live television. When someone like that speaks up, you know something serious is going down in that locker room. But here's the crazy part that nobody's talking about. This whole situation is even messier than it looks. We've got Dillon Gabriel mysteriously vanishing after his girlfriend went viral on TikTok. We've got Stefanski's job hanging by a thread, and we've got Shedeur Sanders out here proving everyone wrong. Buckle up, because this story has more twists than a Hollywood movie.
Around as a head coach, and the one thing about Vrabel you would say is this guy's an alpha dog. Like, no one's going to mess with him. And I think when you have a guy who's in that leadership role, that one has been in your shoes as a player, and then two demands a very high level and a high standard of you, but then also loves you up. You saw him out there on Sunday running out to Drake May when he took a shot, and they asked Drake about it. He said, look, he coaches us hard, he's tough on us, but we know he loves us too. And it's a very fine balance. And so I think Vrabel's EQ, IQ has allowed them to accelerate their process. So I think if you're the Cleveland Browns, how do you find, and look, we don't know what will happen with Stefanski.
Let me start by saying this. Brian Hoyer is not the type of guy who runs his mouth. For over a decade, this man has been the ultimate professional. He's been a backup quarterback who knows how to keep his head down, stay in his lane, and respect the organization. So when he goes public and says Kevin wasn't being honest about Shedeur's readiness, that's not gossip. That's someone dropping receipts. Here's what Hoyer exposed, and this is absolutely wild. While Stefanski was standing at press conferences telling the media that Shedeur Sanders needed more development time, that he wasn't ready for NFL speed, behind closed doors, something completely different was happening. Shedeur was dominating in practice. We're talking about completing 80% of his passes with the second-team offense, making reads that veteran quarterbacks struggle with, and commanding the huddle like a 5-year starter. But guess who was still getting all the first-team reps? Dillon Gabriel, Kevin Stefanski's hand-picked golden boy, the quarterback he personally vouched for during the draft process. Now here's where this gets really interesting. When Shedeur Sanders first got drafted by the Browns, they had him listed as third string. Third string! This is a kid who dominated at Colorado, who has NFL bloodlines, who everyone knew was special, and they buried him on the depth chart like some undrafted free free agent fighting for a practice squad spot. And you know what the crazy part was? Even when Shedeur was sitting at third string, the media was all over him. Reporters were in his face every single day asking questions, treating him like he was the main story even when he supposedly wasn't the main story. Why? Because everyone in that building knew. The players knew it, the assistant coaches knew it, and according to Hoyer, even Stefanski deep down knew it. Shedeur Sanders was the best quarterback on that roster from day one. Hoyer painted an incredible picture of what was really happening inside those practice facilities. He talked about watching practice film where Shedeur would work with the second-team offense, worse receivers, worse offensive line protection, and still outperform Dillon Gabriel, who had all the advantages of working with the starters. There was one specific practice that Hoyer mentioned, and listen to this because it's insane, where Shedeur threw 5 touchdown passes in team drills, 5, with backup players against the first-team defense. And what did Stefanski do after that practice? He walked out to the media and said Dillon Gabriel gives us the best chance to win. Even the players were looking at each other confused. How do you watch a quarterback throw 5 touchdowns with inferior weapons and still say he's not ready?
In the AFC North, I think he's the right attitude. I don't know if they will look at his way, but I think that that's the type of guy you want to go and hire who, when everybody looks at that organization, they're going to say there's an undoubted leader of who we're going to go to with anything.
Yeah, we'd love to have that. Do you think the legal issue, and we know the NFL can freeze guys out if they want, do you think that becomes a roadblock at all to him becoming a head coach again?
I mean, look, I wouldn't put it past the league to try to do something like that, but also I know the owners want to win. And if they believe that he's the best candidate, I think you throw that out the window and say...
Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Where is Dillon Gabriel? This dude has been radio silent for weeks. I'm not exaggerating. He's gone full witness protection program mode. And before you say, well, he's injured, yeah, that's what they're claiming. But here's the fishy part. How does a backup quarterback who's barely seeing the field suddenly get injured? What happened? Did he trip over equipment? Did he pull something during warm-ups? Nobody's explaining this mystery injury, and that silence is loud. The last time we heard anything substantial about Dillon Gabriel was when his girlfriend decided to blast the Browns organization on TikTok. She basically said that the Browns were playing favorites and her man wasn't getting a fair shot, which is absolutely wild when you think about it, because Dillon was the starter. He was the favorite. But here's what I think really happened, and this connects to why Hoyer finally decided to speak up. After that TikTok video went viral, there were reportedly emergency meetings at the Browns facility. Word on the street is that owner Jimmy Haslam himself called Stefanski into his office. Think about how crazy that is. The owner having to intervene in quarterback decisions because the situation got so messy. And suddenly, after those meetings, Dillon Gabriel is nowhere to be found. Your head coach won't even address the situation or defend his own guy. That tells you everything you need to know about how bad this got behind the scenes. Brian Hoyer dropped an absolute bomb when he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but this was essentially his message, sometimes coaches get so invested in being right about their evaluation that they'll tank a whole season rather than admit they were wrong. Tank a whole season. A 15-year NFL veteran is saying that Kevin Stefanski was willing to lose games, willing to destroy team chemistry, willing to waste everyone's career just to avoid admitting he was wrong about Dillon Gabriel over Shedeur Sanders. That's not just a hot take. That's an indictment of Stefanski's entire approach to leadership. Now, here's where things get even more frustrating, and I have to call out some of the Cleveland media for this. There have been certain reporters trying to spin this situation to protect Kevin Stefanski, acting like he never had a fair shot because he didn't have a good quarterback. Wait, what? He chose Dillon Gabriel over Shedeur. He refused to give Shedeur first-team reps in training camp. You can't make a bad evaluation, stick with it despite all evidence to the contrary, and then complain about not having good quarterback play. Brian Hoyer's response to this media spin was legendary. He said something like, I've been in quarterback rooms with Tom Brady, with Cam Newton, with some of the best ever. When you have talent like Shedeur Sanders, you don't hide it on third string. You don't play games with the depth chart. You play your best players, period. And this is what kills me about some NFL media coverage. Certain reporters get so close to coaches that they can't be objective anymore. They try to protect relationships instead of telling the truth. Hoyer mentioned that there were ownership-level interventions regarding the quarterback situation. His actual words. He said in all his years in the NFL, he's never seen anything like it, where an owner essentially had to force a coach to play the obviously better quarterback. Let me connect all these dots for you. Jimmy Haslam is not a patient owner. When he sees Shedeur Sanders sitting on the bench, performing like a star in practice, while Dillon Gabriel struggles in games and Kevin Stefanski keeps making excuses, you better believe he's making phone calls. Then Dillon's girlfriend goes viral on TikTok criticizing the organization, and suddenly Dillon disappears from public view? That's not a coincidence. That's damage control. But let's talk about the most important part of this whole story, Shedeur Sanders' actual performance on the field. Because while all this drama was happening behind the scenes, this kid went out and balled. Take that Pittsburgh game, for example. The Steelers have one of the most feared defenses in the entire NFL. TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Cameron Hayward, these are legitimate superstars, and Shedeur walked into that hostile environment and played with absolutely zero fear. Brian Hoyer broke down the film from that game and called it a masterclass. He specifically mentioned one play, a 3rd and long situation where Shedeur stood in the pocket with TJ Watt bearing down on him, kept his eyes downfield, and delivered a perfect strike for a first down. That's not rookie behavior. That's franchise quarterback behavior. The kid was throwing dimes in tight windows, extending plays with his legs, doing everything you want from your quarterback. And this was against one of the best defenses in football. Now, I want to be fair for a second and address something Hoyer also acknowledged. Was Dillon Gabriel really given a fair shot? When you're playing behind an offensive line that can't protect you, when you don't have weapons that can consistently get separation, when your coaching staff is clearly already looking at another quarterback on the roster, how are you supposed to succeed? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Dillon is better than Shedeur. That would be ridiculous. Shedeur is clearly the more talented, more NFL-ready prospect. But the way the Browns handled this entire situation was messy from top to bottom, and that affected everyone involved. Here's what really sealed the deal for me, and why Brian Hoyer speaking up was so important. His final comments were absolutely devastating. He said something along the lines of, "In all my years in the NFL, I've never seen a coach actively work against his own team's success to protect his ego." But that's exactly what happened in Cleveland this year. And look, I know Shedeur has his doubters. There are people who say he's only in the NFL because of his famous father, people who think he's all hype and no substance. But when you've got someone like Brian Hoyer, a guy with zero connection to Deion Sanders, no agenda, no reason to hype up Shedeur, saying this kid is genuinely special, that carries real weight. The truth is, Shedeur Sanders has been proving doubters wrong his entire life. When the Browns drafted him and buried him at 3rd string, it was disrespectful, but he didn't complain to the media, he didn't cause drama, he just put his head down and worked. And now he's got the starting job, the respect of his teammates, and even respected veterans like Hoyer publicly backing him up. So what happens next in Cleveland? Well, Kevin Stefanski's job security is definitely in question. Dillon Gabriel's future with the team looks finished, and Shedeur Sanders, he's just getting started. This is his team now, and everybody in that organization knows it. The Browns finally have their franchise quarterback. They just almost messed it up because one coach couldn't swallow his pride and admit he made a mistake. Thank God for Brian Hoyer having the courage to speak truth to power and call out what everyone was seeing, but nobody was willing to say publicly. At the end of the day, the truth always comes out in the NFL. Brian Hoyer just accelerated that process by exposing what really went down behind closed doors in Cleveland. And now we get to watch Shedeur Sanders prove he belongs at the highest level. If you're riding with Shedeur and want to see him take over the league, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below telling me what you think about this whole situation. The best is definitely yet to come for this young quarterback. Believe that.